All right, so the next the next seven of Revelation is seven visions of victory, and in order to read that well, it's leaning on some imagery of the Old Testament. So I'm going to take just a minute to go back to the book of Daniel so you can understand the imagery it's leaning on. You are in for a really, really, really big treat. You are going to get to see the artistic talent of J.W. Dobbins. There it is. The artistic talent of J.W. Dobbins. I will tell you what you're looking at in just a second because it might be hard to understand. Right? So the book of Daniel, one of the big things running through it is the story of 5 kings and 5 kingdoms. And this is told a couple different ways in the book of Daniel. So the first time you see it, there is a giant statue whose head is made of gold, and then there's the part of silver, then there's part of bronze, and then there's the part on the bottom that is made of iron and clay. And then later, it depicts the same. Remember, the Jewish thinkers like to tell the same story over and over from different perspectives. So when they talked about these 4 kingdoms as a statue once, later in Daniel chapter 7, it talks about them as 4 beasts, 4 horrific creatures. And so that's what we're going to look at now. This one is a lion. This one, I will let you decide whether it is a bear or a bunny rabbit that has gotten so fat that it swallowed its ears up. This one is a leopard, and it says that the 4th kingdom is exceedingly terrifying, so it's a ghost. All right, so let's look at Daniel chapter 7. Pause this and turn there if you need to. All right, it says, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream in his visions, in visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and 4 great beasts, right? So we're talking about beasts here, like the beasts of Revelation, right? 4 great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. So what we're going to see is these things coming up out of the waters, out of the sea. They're not just animals. They're not just beasts. They are horrific, twisted caricatures of beasts. So it can't just be a lion. It's a lion with eagle wings stapled on his back, right? It's something that's not right. These are creatures not as creation meant them to be. All right, that's going to be important in a second. Verse 4, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. That's my leopard there. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in his horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And these people reign until one like the Son of Man comes, and he sets up a kingdom that will have no end. Right? So we look at these, and we see that if you go to any decent Bible commentary, right, or just notes, or just ask anybody, it is virtually completely agreed on that each of these beasts represent a kingdom, right? And what we're going to find in this also, there's large agreement. Some people divide these up a little differently, but the overwhelming majority of biblical scholars agree, and I agree with them, that what we are looking at is the kingdom of Babylon, followed by the Medes and Persians. This is where some people do it differently. Some people say Medes, Persians, but most people agree that what's going on is Medes and Persians are considered together. Then we have Alexander's, the Great Empire of Greece, right? As they go and they conquer the known world. And finally, the Empire of Rome, right? So we see that these horrific creatures coming up out of the sea, they represent nations. But when we come a little further and we get the explanation for it in Daniel chapter 7, verse 15, it says, "As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions in my head alarmed me. I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These four great beasts are four kings." So now, wait a minute. Here, later, with the divine explanation, it does not say that they are a nation. It says that they are little kings. We'll make some crowns here. Yeah, I'm getting sloppier as I go, aren't I? Right? So it's the kings of these nations. How are we supposed to think of the imagery of these beasts? And if we just think for a little while, it's not hard to put together. It is simply very, very ordinary to think about a king and his nation. You can exchange the ideas readily, right? So, for example, we could say this week Putin attacked Ukraine and invaded it. Now, wait a minute. Was Putin there on the front line? Was he riding one of the tanks? Did he come in and plant a flag? No, he stayed safely back in Moscow, right? He didn't invade. But we still everywhere understand that we can speak of a king's nation and his military almost like we're talking about an extension of the man himself. Another example would be to say in 1940, Adolf Hitler introduced the world to blitzkrieg warfare when he invaded France and toppled it within the span of about a week, right? Really? Did Adolf Hitler drive one of those tanks? No, he didn't fire a shot in that battle. But we understand that as his kingdom acts, it is the actions of that king, right? So here's why am I going so far as to say that? You need to understand that when we come to the book of Revelation and we start talking about the beast of Revelation, and we've all been saying, oh, we're talking about the Antichrist, the rise of the Antichrist. Well, right? We can. Yes, sometimes we can very comfortably, when we are talking about the beast of Revelation, we can say we're talking about the Antichrist, or we can talk about the Antichrist's nation, his worldwide power that he is leading, right? So we're comfortable either one. And if we begin talking about the beast in Revelation like it is a kingdom, then that's not surprising. If we begin to talk about it like it's an individual ruler, then that's not surprising either, because that's the way the Bible thinks about it, right? And one of the ideas that I want to try to persuade you of is that when we look to Revelation, it's trying to make us think about Daniel, right? When it starts talking about the Antichrist in his kingdom as a beast rising up out of the waters, this is very, very much on his mind. And so when we get to talking about the beast in Revelation, I think 17, maybe 18, but I think I'm talking about chapter 17. Yes, I am. it's going to lean on this, and we're going to understand Revelation 17 better because of this.